I can still see that land office counter, the scratches in the wood. Someone had carved initials there. You know, like they'd claimed something. And I remember thinking, God. I remember thinking that I'd never get to carve anything anywhere. Never own a thing that was truly mine. My children's hands were gripping my skirt. 3 sets of small fingers. Worn fabric bunched in their fists. I could feel their weight pulling at me. Literally pulling. And I was so tired of being pulled. Emma was 7, the boys. Thomas and James were 5 and 3. Their wrists looked too thin that day. I'd noticed that morning while braiding Emma's hair how fragile their bones seemed. The clerk had ink stains on his fingers. Funny what you remember. Right, I'd rehearsed my question for 3 days, practiced it in my head while scrubbing other people's floors, while mending clothes by candlelight after the children slept. I'd like information about homesteading. Simple, direct, like I had every right to ask. He looked up from his ledger and, well, he laughed. Not a surprised laugh, a confirming one, like I'd just proven something he'd always known about women like me. A woman? He leaned back in his chair, and it creaked. With children, you'll be dead by winter. Mrs. Mitchell, assuming you even make it through summer. My children went very still. They'd learned not to hope out loud. You see, learned it from watching me fail, over and over. I was already turning toward the door, already composing the lie I'd tell them about why we couldn't, when a voice stopped me. That quarter section by the creek, the voice said. Deep, but not loud. Calm. Like he was discussing weather. I'll sell it to you. I turned. Cole Harrison was standing there. And I knew who he was because, well, everyone knew Cole Harrison, wealthiest rancher in the territory. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice because people listened anyway. But I have no money, I whispered. And God, I hated how my voice sounded. Small, ashamed. Then work for it, he said, just like that. Work for it. Not beg, not accept charity with a bowed head and grateful tears. Work. My housekeeper just quit, he continued. And his eyes they were kind. I think. Or maybe I just needed them to be. Room, board, and wages after 2 years. The land's yours. Emma's hand tightened in mine. A small anchor against the terror of possibility. The clerk was staring, already composing tomorrow's gossip. I could see it in his face, but I was looking at Cole Harrison's calloused hands. His worn boots, expensive once, but practical now. I was calculating. The way I'd learned to calculate everything. What does he want? What's the real price 2 years? I said, testing the words. I could survive anything for 2 years. 2 years. He agreed. When I shook his hand, my fingers trembled from more than exhaustion. You want to know what I was thinking? Honestly, I was thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Listen, I wasn't naive. A wealthy man offering a desperate widow room and board, I knew how that looked. I knew what people would say, what they were probably already saying. The way the clerk's eyes had narrowed when Cole made his offer. But here's the thing. I'd tried everything else. Factory work that paid pennies and cost me daylight with my children. Sewing until my fingers bled and still couldn't make rent. Laundry that left my hands raw and red and barely bought bread. I'd asked for help from my late husband's family. They'd closed the door in my face. Said I must have done something to drive their son to drink himself to death. Maybe I had. I don't know. You spend enough time being told something. You start to believe it. So when Cole Harrison offered me actual work, with terms and wages and a contract the clerk was already preparing, I took it. But I took it with walls already built in my chest. Protection. You understand, 2 years? Just 2 years. Keep my head down. Do the job. Earn the land. Then leave. Simple. The house has 4 bedrooms, Cole said as we walked to his wagon. The children walked between us, silent and wide-eyed. Your family can take the east wing. Privacy. Privacy. The word felt foreign. We'd been living in a boarding house room meant for one person. All 4 of us. The children slept 2 to a bed. I slept sitting up in a chair most nights so they'd have space. I appreciate your generosity, I said carefully. It's not generosity, Mrs. Mitchell. He helped Emma up into the wagon, and his hands were gentle. You'll work for what you earn. I need someone who can manage a household. You need land and security. It's business. Business. Right. I could do business. Thomas was staring at Cole's horse, a big bay gelding tied to the wagon. Can I touch him? I started to say no, to apologize for my son's boldness. But Cole was already nodding. His name's Scout. He likes carrots and having his nose rubbed. Here. He lifted Thomas up so the boy could reach, and I watched my son's face light up in a way I hadn't seen in so long. Not since his father died. Not since everything went dark. You know how to handle children, I said before I could stop myself. I know how to handle horses, Cole replied, setting Thomas back down. Turns out the principles are similar. Patience, consistency, respect. The way he said respect like children deserved, it made something shift in my chest. But I pushed it down, locked it away, because hope, I'd learned, was more dangerous than despair. Despair, you could survive. Hope could kill you. We drove out of town in silence. My children pressed against me, and I tried not to notice how steady Cole's hands were on the reins. How he didn't make conversation just to fill the quiet. How he didn't look at me with pity or expectation or anything I could name. It terrified me more than if he had. The house was too beautiful for my rough hands. I mean it. That first night, after Cole had shown us through 4 bedrooms, a parlor with actual rugs, a kitchen with a cast iron stove that didn't smoke after he'd left us to settle in and gone back to the barn to check the horses. I stood in the parlor and I couldn't breathe. The children were already asleep. clean beds with quilts that smelled like lavender instead of mildew. Emma had cried when she saw her room. Actually cried. Is this really ours? Mama? I hadn't known how to answer. So there I was, standing in front of this fireplace dark and cold, but laid with kindling, ready to light, and I couldn't do it. Couldn't light it, because it wasn't mine. None of this was mine. I was an employee, a housekeeper. This was his hearth, his home, his kindness that could be withdrawn the moment I failed to meet whatever expectations he hadn't yet named. Make yourself at home, he'd said before leaving. Casual, easy. But how do you make yourself at home in a place you're certain you don't deserve? The cold settled into my bones. That's what cold does out here. You know, it doesn't just touch your skin, it moves deeper, finds the hollow places inside you and fills them with ice. I compromised, told myself I'd light the fire in the morning, before the children woke. For them, not for me. Practical. Not personal. When dawn came gray and soft through windows that actually had curtains, I knelt at that hearth and built the fire with shaking hands. The kindling caught easy. Cole had prepared it well, and when the flames took hold, the warmth felt. God, it felt like forgiveness. I made coffee, real coffee. Not the chicory-stretched stuff I'd been rationing. The smell alone made me want to weep. The children came downstairs like they were entering a church, quiet, reverent. We ate breakfast at a table that could fit 6 people. And Emma whispered, "Is this real, Mama?" "It's real," I said. But I didn't believe it. Not yet. Cole joined us, not sitting at the head of the table like I expected, but off to the side. He asked Thomas about the horse from yesterday, asked James what he liked for breakfast, asked Emma if her room was comfortable, treated them like people, not burdens, not obstacles. He didn't ask me anything, just nodded when I poured his coffee, said, "Thank you, ma'am," in that quiet way of his. After breakfast, he rode out to check cattle. I watched from the kitchen window, watched him move with that easy confidence men have when they know exactly where they belong in the world, and I realized I was already memorizing his routines, mapping the shape of this life I'd entered but didn't yet inhabit. The house settled around us through the morning. The children explored cautiously, like the rooms might disappear. I cleaned a kitchen that was already clean, organized a pantry that was already organized, trying to prove something, my worth, maybe my right to be here. But that night, standing at the cold hearth again, because I'd let the morning fire die after breakfast, couldn't presume to keep it burning all day. I realized the question I was really asking. How long until he regrets this arrangement? How long until I prove I'm exactly what that land office clerk said I was? Too weak, too broken, too much of a burden to survive? I didn't light the fire that night either, just stood there in the cold, practicing my armor. 3 months in, and I'd found a rhythm. You know, that's what work does. It gives you patterns, something to hold on to. Mornings, I'd wake before dawn and light that parlor fire, still telling myself it was for the children. But honestly, I'd stopped believing my own lies. The warmth was for me, too. I'd started to need it. The kitchen became mine in a way I hadn't planned. My bread was better than the previous housekeeper's Cole said so. And he wasn't a man who gave false compliments. I learned how he liked his coffee strong. Black. No sugar, and that he always checked the horses before breakfast. No matter the weather. The children. God. The children were thriving. That's the word. They were thriving in ways that broke my heart because it showed me how much they'd been merely surviving before. Emma collected eggs every morning with this quiet competence that reminded me of myself. The boys followed Cole to the barn when he'd let them. Learning to rope and ride and do all those things I couldn't teach them. Thomas had calluses forming on his hands. 5 years old and already learning what it meant to work for something. I caught myself thinking in terms of our kitchen one afternoon, corrected it immediately to his kitchen, but the thought had been there. Possessive, dangerous. Then came the day the supply wagon was delayed, and Cole brought unexpected guests home for dinner. 3 business associates from Cheyenne, all talking cattle prices and railway expansion. I had an hour to prepare a meal for 7 people with whatever I could scrape together from the pantry. I made it work. Roasted chicken that had been meant for tomorrow, potatoes stretched with cream, biscuits that came out perfect because I'd been practicing. Needed to prove I could manage this household. That I was worth what he was paying me. The men ate like they'd forgotten what good cooking tasted like. Made compliments that slid off me like water. But Cole's eyes found mine across the table. And he gave this small nod. This quiet acknowledgement that said more than their verbose praise. "Well done," he said later, after they'd left. Just those 2 words. But I believed them. And I hadn't believed praise in years. Not since my husband started telling me everything I did was wrong. Not since his family blamed me for his death. That night, tucking James into bed, he asked, "Is this home now?" "Mama." I smoothed his hair back, still baby soft. Though he was trying so hard to be like Thomas, and I didn't have an answer. Because home implied permanence, and I'd learned not to trust permanent things. They could be taken away. They could crumble. They could rot from the inside while still looking solid from outside. "We're safe here," I said instead. Which was true, for now. But when I went down to light the parlor fire, because I'd started doing it every evening now, not even pretending it was for anyone but myself, I paused with my hand on the mantel, trying to remember when this started feeling like permission instead of trespassing. When did I stop cataloging escape routes? When did I start thinking in terms of spring planting instead of just getting through winter? The fire caught easy. It always did. Because Cole made sure the kindling was ready. Made sure everything was ready so I could do my job well. He was good at that, creating space for people to succeed. Dangerous. That kind of thoughtfulness. Really dangerous. It happened in the middle of the night. The kind of night where the cold makes every sound sharp and clear. Cole was knocking on my door, urgent but controlled. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need your help." I was up and dressed before I'd fully processed the request. That's what you learn in poverty. You know, how to move fast when crisis comes. "The bay mare," he said as we crossed to the barn. "She's foaling, having trouble. Ranch hands are out fixing fence breaks from today's wind. It's just..." It's just us. Just us. And a horse in distress. And me, who'd never... I mean, I'd seen animals give birth from a distance, farm animals, when I was young. But I'd never actually... The mare was panicked. I could see it in her eyes, this wild, terrified incomprehension of her own body betraying her. I knew that look. I'd worn it 3 times myself. I need you to help me guide the foal, Cole said. His voice was steady, the kind of steady that made you believe everything would be okay, even when you knew it might not be. Can you do that? I don't know how. I'll tell you. I'll guide you through it. But I need your hands because mine aren't. Look, I need help. And you're who I have. Do you trust me? Did I trust him? God, what a question to ask in a moment like that. Yes, I said, and meant it. So I put my hands where he told me to put them, into the mare, into warmth and blood and the terrible intimacy of birth. And Cole's voice, his voice stayed steady through all of it. Feel for the hoof. There. Guide it forward. Gently. Trust yourself. Trust myself. I'd forgotten how to do that. The foal came in a rush of fluid and relief. Alive, struggling to stand on legs that didn't know how to work yet. And I collapsed against the stall wall and started crying. Not from fear, though God knows I'd been terrified, but from this overwhelming relief that I hadn't failed him. You did good, Cole said, and he was checking the mare, but his voice was for me. Real good. Sarah. He'd never called me by my first name before. Always Mrs. Mitchell. Always proper. But right then, covered in blood and birth and exhaustion, he'd called me Sarah. I didn't do it for you, I said through tears. Don't know why I said it. Needed to. Maybe. Needed to push against this thing that was growing between us. I know, Cole said gently. You did it for her. And that broke something in my chest. Because he was right. I'd done it for the mare, for this helpless creature struggling to bring life into the world, not to impress him, not to prove my worth, just because something needed doing and I was there to do it. He built up the parlor fire when we got back to the house, didn't ask permission, just did it while I cleaned the blood from my hands. My arms. We sat in silence, both of us exhausted, stained, smelling like animals and sweat, and watched the foal nurse through the window. No words, but something had shifted, like a fence line moved, or a border redrawn, and I didn't know if I was terrified or relieved. Maybe both. The town whispers got louder after 6 months, loud enough that even I couldn't pretend not to hear them anymore. I'd taken the children for supplies flour, sugar, fabric for new shirts, because the boys were growing so fast. Normal things, domestic things. But the milliner's wife looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Must be nice, she said. Voice pitched to carry. Having such a generous protector. Protector, not employer. The word choice was deliberate. I wanted to tell her I earned every penny. that I worked dawn to dusk managing a household larger than she'd ever seen, that I'd nursed sick cattle and mended fences and done every damn thing asked of me with competence and dignity. But you know what? She wouldn't have believed it. People believe what they want to believe, what they needed to believe. Maybe that a widow with 3 children couldn't possibly earn her own way, that there must be some other transaction happening. Emma was quiet on the wagon ride home. Too quiet, and when Thomas asked, because children ask everything, don't they? When Thomas asked if Mr. Harrison was going to be his father, I had no answer that didn't reveal too much. He's been good to us, I said carefully. That's not what I asked. Mama? No, it wasn't. Cole knew something had happened the moment we returned. Don't ask me how. Maybe he just knew my face by then. The way I held my shoulders. Maybe he'd gotten good at reading the small signs of women trying not to break. This town's always needed someone to talk about, he said while helping unload supplies. Doesn't make their talk true. But here's what I realized. Sitting at that kitchen table after the children had gone to bed, the town's story wasn't entirely wrong. Something was happening between us, unspoken, unacted upon, but present. This current that ran beneath every interaction. Every time his hand brushed mine, passing the coffee pot. Every time I caught him watching me with this look I couldn't quite name. I was afraid of what people said, but I was more afraid they were saying out loud what I hadn't admitted to myself yet. That I wanted this. Wanted it to mean something. Wanted him to mean something. That night. Watching Cole teach the boys to clean saddles, his patience infinite. His hands sure and steady, I realized something else too. I wasn't defending my reputation anymore when I got angry at the gossip. I was defending his honor, his decency, because they were implying he was the kind of man who'd exploit my situation. And that made me furious in a way nothing else did. When did his reputation start mattering more to me than my own? When did I start feeling protective of him instead of just grateful to him? The questions kept me up that night, staring at the ceiling of my too comfortable room in this too beautiful house. Listening to my children breathe easy in their sleep, safe, fed, thriving. Everything I'd wanted for them, everything I'd thought I couldn't provide. And the cost, the real cost, wasn't my labor or my dignity. It was this terrifying realization that I was starting to want more than just survival. I was starting to want to live. The letter came on a Tuesday. Funny how you remember details like that when everything's about to shift. Teaching position available in Larkspur, the neighboring town. 20 miles away, steady wages, small cottage included, enough to support me and the children without this, without the complicated weight of gratitude and attachment and all these feelings I couldn't quite name. Freedom, that's what it offered. Simple, clean freedom. I held that letter like it was salvation. Listed all the logical reasons to go escape the gossip. Simpler life. No more confusion about what this arrangement was becoming. The children could have a normal life. I could be just their mother again. Not an employee. Not this strange in-between thing. But when I tried to imagine leaving, the images that came weren't logical. They were sensory. The hearth I lit every morning without thinking I'd be abandoning that. Emma's favorite hiding spot in the barn where she read books Cole had given her. Thomas and James's easy laughter when they helped with the horses. The way this house settled around us at night like we belonged here. I stood in front of that parlor fire, the one I tended daily now, and tried to remember when it became mine. When I stopped asking permission in my head before lighting it. When it transformed from his hearth to ours. Couldn't remember. That's the truth. The shift had been so gradual, I'd missed it happening. That's what scared me most. Not that I'd changed, but that I hadn't noticed changing. Hadn't noticed when survival stopped being enough. When I'd started wanting things again, dangerous things like happiness and partnership and love. God, was that what this was? I'd loved my husband once, before the drinking, before the anger, before I learned that loving someone didn't mean they'd treat you well. That love could rot inside you like meat gone bad. But Cole wasn't. He was nothing like that. Cole was steady, patient, respectful. Never raised his voice to the children or to me. Never made promises he didn't keep. Never looked at me like I was less than because I'd stumbled. Because I needed help. Which made it worse. Somehow. Because I couldn't blame him for any of this. Couldn't be angry at him for making me want things I'd sworn off wanting. The real fear, the bone-deep terror that kept me frozen in front of that fire was simple. What if I let myself live instead of just survive? What if I admitted I wanted this, wanted him? Wanted this life? Wanted permanence, and then lost it all? Losing everything. When you have nothing isn't that hard. You're already at the bottom. But losing everything when you've climbed back up, when you've let yourself hope, that would destroy me. Completely. I folded the letter, put it in my apron pocket, told myself I'd decide tomorrow. But the decision was already made. Wasn't it? I just needed the courage to admit it. Not courage to stay. That was the easy part. Courage to want. To let myself want without armor. Without escape routes. Without cataloging all the ways it could go wrong. That's the kind of courage I wasn't sure I had. It was James who broke everything open. My baby. 3 years old and already seeing what I'd been trying so hard to ignore. "Mama," he said at dinner. In that clear voice children have when they're stating obvious truths. "Why doesn't Mr. Harrison have a wife?" The table went silent. Emma's eyes went wide. Thomas suddenly found his potatoes fascinating. And Cole? Cole just looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Patient. Waiting. That's not polite to ask. "James?" I said. "But you wonder too," he replied. "I heard you tell Emma." God, children hear everything. Don't they? Every whispered conversation you think is private. "It's all right," Cole said quietly. "It's a fair question." After dinner, after the children were in bed, he found me in the parlor. I was standing at the hearth, always the hearth, like it was the only solid thing in the world, and he just stood there, waiting, giving me space to speak first. But I didn't have the words, so he spoke instead. I bought that land hoping you'd stay forever, he said, simple, direct, like he was discussing weather. Not as my employee, Sarah, as my wife. The world tilted, actually tilted. I gripped the mantle to keep steady. I can't, I said immediately, automatically. I can't risk if the marriage fails. I lose the land. I lose security for my children. I can't. What have I done? Cole interrupted gently. To make you think I'd take from you what I promised. And I had no answer. Because he'd done nothing. Nothing but keep his word. Nothing but treat me with respect. Nothing but create space for me to succeed and heal and become myself again. It's not you, I whispered. It's me. I'm afraid of wanting this, of wanting you, because wanting means losing. And I can't. I can't survive losing again. You've been surviving, he said, moving closer, not touching, just close. But I don't want you to survive. Sarah, I want you to live. There it was, the thing I'd been running from. This idea that life could be more than just getting through the day, more than just protecting my children and keeping my head down and not hoping for too much. I used to think accepting help made me weak, I said, and my voice was breaking now, all my armor cracking apart. But you never helped me. Did you? You waited, while I figured out I was stronger than I thought, until I was strong enough to choose this. And are you, he asked, strong enough? Was I God? Was I strong enough to be vulnerable, to admit I wanted partnership instead of just safety? To risk my heart on the belief that not all men were like my husband, that some men, maybe this man, could be trusted with the tender parts of me. I thought about Emma's quiet confidence, Thomas's calloused hands from good work, James's easy laughter, what they'd learned here. Not just survival skills, but what it looked like when adults treated each other with dignity, when strength included gentleness, when love didn't mean losing yourself. What example was I setting if I chose fear over hope? If I taught them that walls were safer than windows, that surviving was enough when living was possible? Yes, I said, and then, stronger. Yes, I'm strong enough, because you helped me remember I always was. His hand found mine, warm, steady, real. I don't need rescuing, I continued, because this was important. This needed to be clear. I need partnership, someone who'll walk beside me, not carry me. I know, Cole said, and he was smiling now. This small, genuine smile I'd seen him give my children, but never me. That's why I waited, for you to see it too. The fire crackled behind us, The house settled into night around us, and I let myself lean into him not from weakness, but from choice, from trust, from this growing, terrifying, beautiful certainty that maybe, just maybe, I deserved good things too. Maybe we both did. Spring came early the year after we married. Seems fitting, doesn't it? All that thawing, all that new growth. I'm sitting in our parlor now. Our parlor. And I don't correct myself anymore watching Cole teach James to read. My baby's 6 now. Reading. Thriving. His brothers are out with the ranch hands. Learning to work cattle. Emma's upstairs writing in the journal Cole gave her for her birthday. The land by the creek is legally mine. Ours. The deed came through last month. Though, honestly, I'd stopped thinking about it weeks before that. Because somewhere along the way, I realized this ranch was home. The land was never really the point. The point was having a place to belong, people to belong with. A life that was more than just survival. This morning, James asked when we'd visit our land by the creek, and I realized I'd started thinking of this whole ranch as ours. The house, the horses, the hearth I tend each morning. Not because it was given to me, but because I built a life here, because I chose it, because choosing is its own kind of ownership. Cole catches my eye across the room. And there's this understanding there, this quiet acknowledgement of everything we've become. Partners, parents, people who've learned that strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's knowing when to set the weight down, when to let someone help lift it. I used to think accepting help made me weak. Used to think vulnerability was the same as fragility. But I was wrong. So wrong. The strongest thing I ever did was admit I wanted more than just to survive. Was let myself be seen, really seen by someone who looked at my scars and my children and my rough hands and saw worth, saw strength, saw someone worth waiting for. We've had hard days since the wedding. Days when the children fight, or the cattle get sick, or I wake up terrified this is all temporary, that it'll be taken away like everything else. But Cole's there in those moments, not fixing it, not carrying me, just there, present, steady, reminding me that I'm not alone anymore, that I chose not to be. And slowly, so slowly, I barely notice it happening. I'm learning to trust that, to trust him, to trust myself. The fire burns warm in the hearth. I built it this morning, like I do every morning, like I'll do tomorrow. And the day after that, as far into the future as I can see, it's mine to tend, ours to share, and I don't have to do it alone. That's the whole difference. Really, not that someone rescued me, but that someone waited while I rescued myself, then offered to walk beside me after. That's not a fairy tale. That's better. That's real. The end.